paper tiger keeps moving forward, seizing more territory. Though for now, it's all still just on paper. This time, the aggressor country's army has already boasted about supposedly taking control of Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region. This was reported by the chief of the Russian General Staff, Gerasimov. In turn, the Russian dictator claimed that around the city, 15 battalions of Ukraine's defense forces are supposedly blocked as well. Let me repeat, 15. The numbers are just astronomical. The statement is so outrageous that even Russian war correspondents rushed to mock these claims. Meanwhile, the American administration under Donald Trump, on which Putin was counting, continues to impose and prepare additional sanctions. And the draft peace plan is already being discussed by Washington, Kyiv, and European partners. But let's take it one step at a time. Let's start with Russia's tendency to present wishful thinking as reality. At another meeting at the command post of the Western Military Group, the chief of the Russian General Staff, Gerasimov, said the following: Kupiansk is completely under the control of the Federation. The army of the aggressor country also supposedly holds 80% of Vovchansk in the Kharkiv region. Of course, there is no evidence to support this.
Units of the Western Group have liberated the city of Kupiansk and continue to destroy formations of the armed forces of Ukraine encircled on the left bank of the Oskol River.
According to official data from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the city remains under Ukrainian control. Counter-sabotage operations and searches for subsequent elimination of Russian army sabotage and reconnaissance groups are underway in Kupiansk and its outskirts. In fact, in these shots, you can see Ukrainian soldiers in the city. But the Kremlin doesn't want this kind of truth. That's why, following Gerasimov, the Russian dictator reported that by some miracle, the aggressor country's army even managed to encircle 15 battalions in that area. That's somewhere between 4,500 to 12,000 people. There are a lot of questions. Unfortunately, the Russian side doesn't answer them.
The situation remains stable. Some of the Russian forces are scattered throughout the northern districts of the city. I have no idea who they could have possibly encircled there. Physiology and geometry are the kinds of sciences that make it impossible to encircle 15 battalions there. All in all, it seems Vladimir Putin has chosen the tactic of never surrender, embarrass yourself to the very end. Viktor Tregobov, head of communications for the Joint Forces Group, in a comment to RBC Ukraine.
All right, that's the Ukrainian side. For die-hard Putin fans, statements from Kyiv will never be the truth. But the reports from this parallel reality are so implausible that even pro-military bloggers and those close to the Russian Ministry of Defense were outraged. They write that, in the past few weeks, there have been more and more triumphant reports about the capture of various villages, but these are not confirmed on the ground, and the Ukrainian Defense Forces only publish rebuttals with footage from objective monitoring.
The channel Military Informant writes that the statement about the complete liberation of Kupiansk looks like putting the cart before the horse. He notes that it is unknown what happened to the 18 Ukrainian armed forces battalions that were previously surrounded in Kupiansk. Gerasimov once again presented Putin with a picture of victory and the encirclement of the Ukrainian armed forces in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. The statements by the chief of the general staff about the complete liberation of Kupiansk and that around 15 Ukrainian armed forces battalions were blocked near Kupiansk-Uzlovoy are, to put it mildly, shocking. The Visionary channel expresses outrage from a publication by the Moscow Times on Telegram.
Analysts are convinced that this show is aimed at only one viewer, namely the owner of the White House, U.S. President Donald Trump. Right now, Putin's main goal is to convince the American administration that sanctions, various restrictive measures against Moscow, and strengthening Ukraine's defense forces are pointless. After all, just look, after years, the Russian army has supposedly taken all of Kupiansk, which, once again, does not reflect reality. It's becoming increasingly obvious that this strategy is a losing one for the Russian dictator. Now, the head of the White House pays no attention to Putin's mantras. Moreover, as he already stated on Fox News host Brian Kilmeade's podcast, he has no intention of lifting the sanctions.
They're very powerful, very powerful. I mean, they make it very difficult to sell oil. It's a serious matter. After all, as you know, their entire economy is built on oil. Donald Trump, President of the United States, in a comment to Fox News.
Notably, even with the existing restrictions in place, Washington is not loosening its grip at all. On the contrary, the American administration continues to ramp up sanction pressure. For example, on November 19th, the U.S. imposed new restrictions against several Russian IT companies and related individuals involved in cyber attacks and attempts to circumvent existing measures. The White House emphasizes that all these actions are aimed at deterring Russian aggression against Ukraine. But what's more interesting is that the pressure keeps mounting. During a UN Security Council meeting, the U.S. Permanent Representative Michael Waltz stated that Washington is ready to impose new economic restrictions on the Kremlin. This will happen if Moscow continues to act as if calls for a ceasefire don't concern it.
We imposed additional sanctions against Russia's two largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, on October 22nd. We can introduce more economic measures if Russia continues to ignore calls for a ceasefire. We will also continue to provide weapons for Ukraine's defense.
In the U.S. Congress, signatures are already being collected in support of tightening sanctions against the Kremlin. The initiative comes from Republican Representative Brian Fitzpatrick. He said that members of Congress were officially informed after returning from recess the House must proceed to vote on a package of truly tough restrictions against Russia. And this is not just a political declaration. We're talking about a petition that allows a bill to be brought to the floor for consideration even without the approval of House leadership. All it takes is gathering 218 signatures. So if Moscow was hoping that Western sanctions mechanisms would soon run out of steam, it looks like the opposite is happening. In Washington, they're preparing a new round of pressure.
The United States is demanding that Russia provide an answer regarding the unconditional withdrawal of troops from Ukraine by Thursday. Today, we officially notified both the Secretary of the House and the House leadership about our petition, which will allow us to bring to a vote the issue of imposing devastating sanctions against Russia immediately upon our return. Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican member of the U.S. House of Representatives, on social network X.
And while Washington is laying the groundwork for new restrictive measures, Switzerland is already discussing a draft peace plan. In Geneva, delegations from Ukraine, the U.S., and European partners are sitting at the same table. The Russian side, by the way, is not represented there. Right now, the teams are coordinating the points that Kyiv and Moscow will have to sign in order to end the war. And, as the Russian State Duma has already rushed to declare, these conditions are unacceptable for the Kremlin.
Russian officials and state media continue to actively and persistently create and shape an informational environment in order to reject and dismiss the 28-point peace plan that was recently proposed by the United States government, emphasizing their opposition to the initiative. This indicates that the Kremlin is actively preparing the Russian people to accept nothing less than a complete victory over Ukraine, according to a report from the Institute for the Study of War.
But for the Ukrainian and American sides, judging by the final statements of the delegations after the negotiations in Geneva, everything seems to be going well. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated, "Tremendous progress has been made on the issue of establishing peace." He also added that the agreement itself could be signed very soon.
So we are working on making some changes and adjustments. We hope to resolve certain remaining disagreements and get closer to something that will fully satisfy Ukraine and, of course, the United States. Naturally, in the end, this will have to be approved by our presidents, although I feel quite calm about it, considering the progress we've made.
Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky also responded positively to the negotiations that took place. He said that Kyiv is ramping up diplomatic efforts to bring the war to an end and is receiving strong signals of support from key international partners.
It's important to make sure that the steps toward ending the war are effective and that everything works as it should. Ukraine never wanted this war. We will never be an obstacle to peace. Diplomacy has been stepped up. That's good, very good. We expect that the result will be the right steps. The first priority is a lasting peace, guaranteed security, respect for our people, and respect for everyone who gave their life defending Ukraine from Russian aggression.
In summary, Moscow finds itself at an impasse. If the Kremlin once again tries to dodge making the key decisions needed to end the aggression and puts forward unacceptable demands, then Washington, Europe, and our partners will only unite more strongly and put pressure on Moscow from all sides. And if Putin finally agrees to end his senseless war without achieving any of the stated goals, then questions will arise for the Federation's government. And the main one, what was the point of all this?